Hello, and welcome to another episode of Conscious Living, where we air every Wednesday in Vancouver on 100.5 CFRO FM Co-op Radio. And excuse me, my name is Marc Caron. I'm really excited to bring an exciting guest this week to the program. Her name is Bronwyn Millar, and I want to thank Bronwyn because she's coming in from South Africa, Johannesburg to be exact, and it's late at night there. And so I just want to acknowledge her for staying up late to be on the program. Now, Bronwyn was born into a long line of wild, unconventional women. Her herbalist mother inspired her to find her own path to being a medicine woman. As a feminist, she has worked for many years in activist spaces and advocates for women's freedom and the eradication of violence against women and girls. She had an awakening in 2019, which manifested in psychic and psychedelic orgasmic experiences in which the elemental goddesses emerged. She also writes comedy as she thinks laughter is the most underrated medicine of all, of which I love laughing and I think laughter is great. And today we're going to be talking about her new work and release of the Elemental Goddess Oracle cards. We're going to take a deep dive into the divine feminine, her work, and the goddess within, and what we all need to do, and how we can support the rising of the divine feminine and the goddess in today's world. Welcome to the program, Bronwyn. It's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's so exciting to be here.
Well, we're always, excited about the new way the world's working and, the technology where we can bring guests in from all different parts of the world without just necessarily being in a radio station here in Vancouver. So it's a real pleasure that you were able to stay up late and work your schedule to join us. And, in reading the book that comes with the cards that I was, very grateful to receive, you say a lot of great things that really relate to a lot of the work that we do within the plant spirit medicine world, psychedelic experiences and how profound they can be and what they can do to open up these gateways of communications to the other side. And that's just a small part of what we're going to talk about, even though I know it's a big part, because that's kind of what inspired you to, as you started listening and hearing the goddess. So maybe we can start by you just telling our audience about yourself, your story, what got you into what you're doing, because you do a number of different things from a writer, as a comedian, kinesiology and things. So maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about yourself so we can get an idea of who you are, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm South African born. I've lived here most of my life. I've traveled quite extensively, but been based in South Africa always. My mom, as you mentioned, was a lay herbalist. So growing up, my mom, there was a stream of people in and out her kitchen coming out with herbal teas. She was very famous for a fertility tea containing raspberry leaf, rose hips, and I can't remember something else. And she famously tells people she's made more women pregnant than Jacob Zuma has. He was one of our presidents who has 19 children. And so I grew up with this quite wild, unconventional mother. I do remember chanting circles and witchy friends growing up, and she'd wake me at midnight sometimes to come out to dig comfrey because it was full moon, and the more witches you had digging the comfrey, the more potent it was. But I kind of rejected all of that for many years and came back into natural ways of living when I fell pregnant, which I think is very common for a lot of women, and started questioning, what you do as a parent and how you grow a healthy baby. So I came back into the natural world, but I didn't switch on my metaphysical side for the longest time. I studied kinesiology and, in a way, really carbon body, working with muscles, bones, and joints. I wasn't interested in any of the woo stuff. I really thought that it was, I thought it was silly. I believed in consciousness as some kind of quantum thing that we couldn't understand, but to me, it was just some kind of quirky science that we didn't understand. And then in 2019, my husband and I did a psilocybin trip, and we did a hero's dose, and it was wild. And I didn't enjoy it at all. I enjoyed the first hour and maybe the last hour, but that middle section was dark and hard and unpleasant. But I came out of it with the most incredible psychic artifact. I have the ability, and this is where it gets really crazy. And this is where kind of atheist me really struggled. I walked around for a long time saying to people, this weird thing's happening to me. And they all looked at me like I'd grown another head. But I came out with the ability to have psychic and psychedelic orgasms, which is such an incredible thing. And the goddesses started emerging out of this. And I didn't know that that was really what was going on at first. At first, I was just kind of blown away by what was happening. But when these experiences got more and more intense, because they kind of got more and more intense while we moved to Ireland. And Ireland is the green chakra, the heart chakra of the world. And it is just alive with magic. I mean, I think everybody is a bit psychic in Ireland. And I started experiencing sort of psychic phenomena, and I'd know when things were going to happen. I'd know who was going to call. I'd know when somebody was going to get sick. And the experiences got more and more intense until I started drawing, and I drew the Medusa first. And she was the goddess of the loving eye. She has all these beautiful snakes, and her earthly eyes closed, and her, if I can find her while I'm talking, her third eye open and looking at you with love, but also at herself with love. When I read the real story of Medusa, it's a Me Too story from Greek times. I don't know if that'll come into focus.
Yeah, maybe move it over. There we go.
Not particularly focused, but after that, the goddesses just kept coming and kept coming. And I mean, I'm not punning, that's how it was happening. And I kept drawing them. And eventually I realized that it was some kind of oracle deck. But I drew it as, I used it as a book because as a specialized kinesiologist, I muscle test. And so I could muscle test for the number of the goddess to work with my, the people I was working at. So that came later, that it was an oracle deck, because first it was a book. But the experiences are really insane. So the psilocybin artifact that I have little DMT experiences. So they started out just in orgasm, and now I'm able to trigger them because I've been working on this for 5 years, consciously trying to find other ways to experience them, because I want to be able to consciously channel. I want to be able to channel at times that are more convenient and times that you're more focused on being able to use the magic that you're accessing. And so the experiences themselves are just insane. I have gone into black holes and out of white holes. I've gone into other dimensions, I go into the void very often. And people talk about the void. Channelers talk about the void. Near-death experiences talk about the void. It's a velvety void of nothingness. It's absolute darkness. And it is dark matter. That's what everything is. And everything is folded into that. It's the potential for everything. I've body swapped with my husband. I've met entities from beyond. One of my most memorable experiences was a tour. It was the strangest experience through the mind of a millions of years old goddess, a reptilian insectoid sort of hybrid goddess. And all she did was regard me as I kind of toured through her mind, and I got this incredibly beautiful alien feeling. And it's we would say it's void of emotion, because we wouldn't understand maybe, but there was no emotion. It was almost cold and clinical. She looked at me as though I was an interesting atom. And I've had other multiple wild experiences from that. So anyway, the goddesses started to emerge, and eventually when I had enough to create a deck, I then surrogated as a kinesiologist. I muscle test for each goddess and her aspects, where she slotted in. And so I realized that they were elemental, because Chinese medicine works with the 5 elements. The 5 elements which contain fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And within those, there are 12 meridians. And all of those meridians have acupoints. And so I would find which element she belonged to in the Chinese element. What had also happened, though, was I realized that there weren't just 5 elements. I had air goddesses. I had goddesses that weren't 5 element, that were earth goddesses. And I realized that I was having some kind of strange overlay of the 2 worlds that are quite alien to each other, Western and Chinese. They're very different to each other, and the mythologies are different. And so something about the combination of the 2 kinds of elements is a yin yang thing. The yin is deep and immutable and unknowable and unfathomable and can never be fully explained or understood. It's always going to fold in upon itself, like the Mandelbrot set. It folds in upon itself and folds out below us somehow in a way that is unknowable. The divine feminine is the deepest mystery of all. And so that overlay of the two different kinds of element gives my cards an alien aspect to them, an unknowable and unfindable aspect, because that is what women are. There's something about the female and the feminine that can never be known. Where was I going with this? Yes, the elements. And so these are really cards that are about this carbon reality that we are in, because it's about the elements of this reality. And so the cards really are about healing this body, this life, this entity, releasing feelings, releasing negative baggage that we have been carrying with us, and allowing for the positive reinforcement of new stuff. And so before I studied kinesiology, I studied neurolinguistic programming, and I actually qualified as a counselor or coach, and I didn't enjoy it at all. So the kinesiology was great because it allowed me to put my hands on people's bodies. But while your hands are on a person's body, I realized that if you practice neurolinguistic programming, which I have to say it is hypnosis. They like to say it's not hypnosis. Of course, it's hypnosis. It's beautiful light hypnosis. It's using words and patterns to help people re-strategize and reframe and reformulate ideas in their mind. And so I found the acupoints for each goddess. And then I created a light hypnotic script for each goddess as well. They also have emotions. They have a tagline as well as an affirmation. There's so much information for each goddess. There's four or five pages sometimes. And what I love about that is if somebody who understands the 5 elements and who works with Chinese medicine, if they get the cards, they can work as deeply as they want to. They can do a yin balance with people. They can use the acupoints. They can do the entire practice. Lay people could just pick a card and read the tagline and get something from it, or just get the emotions and get something from it. Get the emotion and the acupoint, rub the acupoint while you're thinking about the emotion, whatever it is. And that becomes powerful because I want them to be able to be read by whoever picks them up in the way that works for them.
Well, your deck is beautiful. I will say that the artwork and all the details within it are fantastic. And I know you did your artwork as well. And some of the people that I've worked with since I've had the deck of cards are just amazed at the art. So that's one thing. And you already touched on it. There's a lot of card decks. I've got a lot of card decks that they tell you something and they give the message of the card. What really impressed me about your deck was exactly what you say. You've got the acupressure point or the acupoints, you've got the description, you've got just the words so you can just get a quick hit of what that elemental goddess represents. And then you've got some action items and exercises that people can do as well to further go down the road of that particular goddess and that card in terms of their own practice. So to me, the way you put it together was really, really well done from my experience, because it wasn't just reading a little bit of a story about whatever that card meant. It had those tangible, we can have the greatest experience and learn things, but if we don't do something with it, it doesn't stick with us in the same kind of way. And you've given some great tools to go deeper along the journey. So I just wanted to really acknowledge that in the work that you've done with the cards in that sense. Now let's back up a little bit, because you talked about not going into the woo-woo and being atheist and all of those kinds of things, and I love that we've got just some similar interests in terms of the psilocybin and your plant medicine work, as well as when you mention NLP, because I believe NLP is a pretty great tool, and then you can use it for good, bad, anything. And the ability to recognize the patterns in our language, our behaviors, our thoughts, and like you say, to kind of rechange things in our brain. So I think that there's a great alignment there, because it's really important, and that you brought some of it into the book. And the cards is quite great. So, the alignment there for me is something I can very much relate to. But for those people who say, these oracle cards, they're black magic, they're woo woo, they're a bunch of garbage, they don't work, or what have you, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how they work and why they work. Because especially coming from an atheist perspective, and growing up with a you know a mother who is somewhat of a witch, and then not believing it, because so many people grow up in a very traditional Western sense, but to grow up in that kind of world is very different. So how does all that kind of fit from how do these cards work? And I'll tell you a couple of stories afterwards, to validate my experience, to know that they do. But what's going on with the energy of the world, so that they are so profoundly accurate?
I think we're just at this time is really that the Kali Yuga is coming to an end, and the Satya Yuga is beginning. I believe we've already entered the age of Aquarius as well. The age of Aquarius is strongly associated with the feminine as well. It's going to be a time of community. And what the message that has come through from the goddesses for me, because I'm now able to get real downloads. At first, I was just having the experience and just not able to channel them, not knowing what was going on, just kind of being in bliss. And now I'm getting messages and real downloads. I had a book downloaded into my head in January in a 15-minute session in the bath that I'm still writing. And I sit down and put my fingers on the keyboard, and I just do this and it comes. It's quite, well, I know what I'm going to be sitting down to do, but I'm not consciously thinking of the words that are going to come out. They just kind of come out. So for me, the profundity of actually having an up close experience with consciousness in that way is really the only thing that can wake you up. I think you have to have that moment where you realize this is bigger than me. And what happened for me was I had this experience, and I still thought that it was, when I was having the orgasms, I just thought, wow, this is just the best sex of my life, and maybe Ireland is good for my sex life. I don't know. But when they got really crazy and the pandemic was starting in Ireland, I started to wonder if I'd lost my mind. And that went on for a while. And that's very common in experiences when people have a Kundalini rising experience, or they have a sudden awakening. You feel like you're going crazy. I lost touch with consensus reality, like a lot of people did during the pandemic. It was a huge epistemological shift. It's changed everything about the world and the way we think. And our systems are breaking down in such a way that, we're losing trust in everything. So a lot of us really detached. And when I realized that what was happening for me was wonderful and a gift and an incredible thing, which was, okay, so going for walks in the forest. Now, didn't have access to mushrooms in Ireland. We didn't know anybody. We couldn't access any of these herbs. And it was the pandemic, so it wasn't like I could buy them. But I was going into the forests of Ireland, and I would disappear for days at a time. It upset my husband a lot because he wanted me around, but I just needed to escape. And I'd go and lie down on the forest floor for, I remember once, 5 hours. I lay on the forest floor and I communicated with a tiny little coral fungus. And I went into the mycelial network under the ground. And I ended up, because I missed Africa so much, tunneling all the way into the rock and back to Africa, into South Africa. And I was completely sober, lying on the forest floor. So the experiences were becoming more and more obvious to me. I was realizing that this was bigger than just a little bit of craziness. And then the synchronicities that happened. I mean, I would meet people, incredible people that would just speak directly to my heart. The right people showed up in my life at the right time. And then the goddesses just started becoming more vocal and telling me, because I wasn't listening. So they started really telling me. And I had an experience where I came out of orgasm and said to my husband, I'm here to bring divine sexual healing to the women of the world. And that's because when women are experiencing, when women are allowed to experience sexuality, orgasm in their bodies in a divine way, with the divine masculine and the divine feminine, the whole world will be a better place. Anyway, so I just said that to him. And afterwards I thought, oh, okay, that's what I'm here to do. And it's interesting because the cards aren't necessarily all very sexual and about orgasms. I think there's only about 5, maybe 7 cards that really explicitly mention that. They're about letting go of taboo, letting go of the stress that you carry, the burdens, the cages that we've wrapped ourselves in.
Well, that's a really powerful statement because I know when I read in the forefront of the book that comes with the cards, where you speak of, the world today and for, centuries and even, millennia, the world has been formed by men for men, and women are certainly treated almost of a subservient kind of position, where if you go back through history, many more thousands of years, the goddess was certainly much more powerful, respected, and revered. And when you talk about sexuality and orgasm and things of that nature, I find it really interesting because, our sexual energy and our sexual power is so powerful, because that's what creates life at the, bottom line,
100%.
right?
100%.
And, we
Celebrate the thing that creates life.
yeah, and I find it such a ridiculous way that we look at things in the world today, because sex is used for advertising, movies, leverage on all sorts of things in terms of advertising everywhere, yet we still make it taboo instead of making it, a beautiful sacred process. And when you talk about sacred sexuality and the honoring of the divine feminine and the sacred goddess, as men, we certainly have a lot we can learn from the goddess and the divine feminine. And it's how do we support that in a really great way? Because it's one thing to, have these experiences. And this is one thing that came to me when you were talking about, the Kundalini experience, people going crazy, whether you're working with psilocybin or what, because it opens up those channels, and why integration is so important, to take that experience to learn and grow from it. And as men, just because it's a elemental goddess deck does not mean that men cannot use this and learn from it. So I want to talk about a little bit about how men can support honoring and creating that safe, sacred space for the divine feminine and the goddess, the elemental goddesses. So maybe you can shine a little light on that for us.
I think it's very important that we remember that men and women are different, and they're different for a reason. And there are things about our sex that are completely immutable, that you can't change about yourself. If we die, 100 years, 1,000 years from now, if they dig up your skeleton and my skeleton, they're going to see that this is a male and this is a female. Our bodies are different. We're made differently for a reason. And the last 30 years or so has been this weird mishmashing of cultures and ideas at loggerheads with each other, lots of hate and divisiveness, and a tearing apart instead of a pulling together. And part of that has been the very radical kind of fights between men and women. I'm a feminist, and I remain a feminist, and I still celebrate men. I think men are not just important; they're essential. There's no yin without the yang. Both things must find a balance. And so the job for men is to be strong and to be gentle and nurturing. And men are more about, so men are yang. Men need to go outside of themselves and create a territory, whereas women need to create a safe, stable space that is home. That's why when men are at their worst, they become aggressive and territorial, because they're protecting a larger territory. Whereas the woman will be a mama bear in her home because she's protecting her home. But we have different roles and different aspects. I found something very interesting out recently. I had to do a muscle refresher course because I was teaching higher level. I used to teach kinesiology as well. And when I went into the muscle course, I found that one of the anecdotes was that men have much more fast twitch muscle fiber in their arms, for example, for hunting, throwing, for fighting. That's why men tend towards things like kung fu and boxing, because punching comes naturally to them. Their shoulders are built for it. And all of the parts of their body that are about fast movements and aggressive movements are strong and powerful and fast, all of those muscles. Women have a lot more slow twitch muscle fibers in our arms and our hands, because we're still cavemen. You know, our bodies don't realize that we're living in 2025 yet. Our bodies are still cavemen. And women's bodies have evolved to do finer work, to sew things, to do, I'm probably going to get a lot of flack from for this, but embroidery. Why do so many women enjoy embroidery? You don't see a lot of men sitting down and having a knit or an embroider. You don't see a lot of women going and joining boxing clubs or kung fu clubs. You do see some. Obviously, there's crossovers. But that's because biologically, we are suited towards that finer work. It's why I draw. I've got my pad with me all the time, and I'm constantly sitting and making fine little fine drawings. I understand the need to have that habit. So I'm possibly getting myself into muddy waters with that, because this whole discussion has become so fraught. And we are not allowed to, not allowed, but people keep censoring us and saying, well, you're not allowed to say that. That's a regressive thing to say. And I'm going to say, why can't I say it? I'm perfectly entitled to have a belief that is different to other people's. And the goddesses have very strongly told me that there is a divine feminine place for women, and there's a divine masculine place for men. And when we meet each other in our full power, we are unstoppable and immortal and incredible. But if we hobble ourselves by believing that we're meant to be something that we're not, or believing that we need, I wouldn't want to be as aggressive as my partner could be. Well, that's a that's a horrible example of it. But there's many things about masculinity that I have no desire to try and emulate. And yet we live in a society that tells women that you have to be the perfect mom, you have to be the perfect wife, and you have to be the perfect career woman. What's wrong with just being in a partnership with somebody that you love and raising children in an old-fashioned way? There's nothing wrong with that. Feminism in a way has taken that off the table for a lot of women, and they feel as though that they're forcing themselves to fit into something that doesn't fit them anymore. Going off on a very strange tangent. I'm going to be quite honest and say this is the first time I've had these thoughts. So, and here I am having them on radio.
Well, it's okay, because I love what you're saying, and you're absolutely right, because you know we have a voice for a reason. And in so many constitutions around the world, you know, it's a freedom of speech and things of that nature. Yet, you know, we've seen it, you know, blatantly over the past, you know, 5+ years with censorship, where all of a sudden freedom of speech is, yeah, it's free as long as it's in alignment with what we want to hear. And I think the most important thing when we take a look at freedom of speech is, you know, I'm not a fan of hate speech or anything of that nature. However, I do respect freedom of speech. And that being said, let's be mindful, let's be respectful, let's be great listeners as well, so we can understand other people's point of view. We don't have to agree with it. And if we don't want to hear it, we can turn the channel, we can hit stop or pause, we can leave the environment if we don't want to hear it. But I think it's important to honor that, and maybe ask ourselves a question: why am I charged by that? Why don't I disagree? Or why do I agree? Or whatever that may be. And we have this polarity where everybody says we want togetherness and oneness and inclusion, yet so much of our actions divide us onto the left and to the right. You know, and it gets to be crazy making, because here's all these beautifully spiritual, understanding people, and then we get charged by certain things, masculine, feminine. We're seeing it in the world today with the woke agendas and different things. And it's, I believe in freedom. Be yourselves, and let's be respectful of others as well in how we communicate. That's just, you know, my take on it. And I'm glad that you brought it up, because it's happening everywhere. People are getting shut down, and then people with really great messages silence that chakra, that throat chakra gets shut down, then they stop speaking. Because I know I ran into this over the past number of years as well, where I quieted myself. and was all of a sudden being very careful and not being really truly my authentic self, my communication, because I was being careful not to offend anyone, you know? And
Oh,
so I think it's important that we understand that. And I just ask people to be, open and respectful, and at the very least listen and seek to understand maybe other people's point of view. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, right?
I've been worried for many years that we kind of have created this homogenous hive mind on social media. I grew up, I've my entire adult life, I've been very far left and an activist, and I've been going to marches most of my life. I love it. I love a march. I get very excited about marches. And then suddenly during COVID, I'm a kinesiologist. I'm very natural. I don't take headache pills. I don't take any kinds of drugs. I don't believe in them. And so I was one of the OG voices for the vaccine. I'm sorry if that might need to be cut out of your show, because I know a lot of people struggle with this conversation. And instantly I was being shut down by all of my friends who'd always agreed with me on so many things, that I was suddenly told that I was far right by people that had known me for years. And I found that very interesting. My politics haven't changed very much, but my position apparently has, because the positions have changed. I find that so interesting. We're not telling our authentic stories. You speak about censorship. If you're censoring people, how do you authentically know what they think? If they're suppressing what they think, it's going to come out somewhere. You know, you're in the healing world. The minute you suppress something, you create terrible disease somewhere else.
Dis-ease,
Um,
right?
yeah. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it in such insane ways. I see how easily people get swept up by the hysteria and want to take one side or the other. But I remember a time when you could be a left wing person and not believe in abortion, but that was okay. You're allowed to have a difference of opinion on one of the aspects. Or you could be a right wing person and be a married gay man, and that was also okay, because you were allowed to have those experiences and ideas and opinions. And it seems we're waking up from this idea where you had to tick all the boxes, or, you can't sit with us if you believe that, we are waking up out of it, because we're really in a time where we have to speak authentically. We've got to build a new world, man. COVID broke the old one, which is a great thing. And it was a fantastic thing, actually. The systems are falling apart, and now we get to rebuild them. And let's do that honestly.
Yeah, and consciously, instead of just, letting, the powers at the top of the population percentage, the small percentage of people who are kind of controlling everything. How do we, as a populace, create the change by organizing together? And, part of it's how we spend our money, what we're learning, what we're doing, and how we treat each other. Because at the
Mm,
end of the day, if the billions of people who are affected and have an effect on what's going on in the world, as we organize versus just staying solo and just being passive about it. So I think, action locally and globally is always important. And it's to encourage, the free speech and the free thought. And I'm a curious guy, so I'm always curious why people think what they believe, or believe what they believe, think what they think, so I can understand it. And I think that's the best and most important part, versus necessarily, you don't always have to agree with everything. And we have to have the emotional maturity to agree to disagree without getting all fired up and angry and like going crazy about it. You know,
mm,
we need more loving, more understanding. And I see it in our community and in different parts of the world where it's happening. People are waking up more and more. um, in this global awakening every day. And that's what I think this new age is bringing. And there's going to be some discomfort. There's going to be some friction as this happens, because for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And in knowing that, how do we go along with on the ride gracefully and making a difference? And part of it is just how we interact with people one on one on many, and even within ourselves, right? So hey, let's do something. We've got about 15, 17 minutes. But before we go, I've got your deck of cards. And we have my partner in production, Michael Kraus, in the background, another great man who knows a thing or two about the divine feminine, the divine masculine, and the masculine energy. And because we talked about, as a man and as men, how we can support the divine feminine and the elemental goddess in this, rising energy of the world. Maybe we can each pull a card, and you can maybe give us some guidance and how we can, and what the card means, and what we can do to move forward from that. So I don't know what way is best, if I pick a card or if you pick a card for me. Either way, it would be great. And I want to pre-frame it by, the other night, a group of people I work with, we had a little gathering, and I pulled out the cards as it got going and people were coming in. I pulled out the cards and I said, "Okay, this is our interview next week. Let's everybody pull a card." And so everybody pulled a card, and then I read what they meant and the impact, because we're half men and half women, and it was really interesting to see the profound, I wouldn't say coincidences, but the meaning. And the women accepted it a little differently, a little warmer, and the men were kind of like, oh, and very relatable to the cards. And in knowing them, I could see what the card was saying as well. So the impact of them and the lessons for each card and each person is really quite impactful. And I've had value for cards, because I've seen, we had one guy, funny story real quick, Airbnb guest years ago, young Asian fellow staying in Vancouver, and he saw all these cards around my place, and he goes, "What are those?" And I told him, and he was kind of like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." So I pulled out a deck of cards, 3 different cards. He pulled the same card, which was awareness, from each deck, 3 decks, right? And
That's
he was a
beautiful.
believer. So what's best? Do you want to pull a card for me? Would you like me to pull a card here? What's best?
You pull a card, Mark. Channel your inner goddess.
Okay. Beautiful deck of cards. I love it. The artwork's great. I'm not looking at them. I'm looking at the back. There it is. I pull card number 29, Goddess of Grief at the Source.
Oh,
Born
wow.
at the source, metal and fire.
29. Let me find her. Okay. So this goddess metal is about cutting. It's about letting go. It's about grief, regret, and remorse. And this goddess talks about an old grief, number 29. So there's a longer practice. Would you like the whole thing, or would you like me to
Just
just...
the shorter version. We don't have to get into the full practice. I will look into that. But what I do want people to know is that there is, kind of a definition and information about what it means, and then there's practices, and which is what I was saying earlier that I love about because it's not just about reading it. You have an exercise that you can do to integrate that into ourselves.
Beautiful. Okay, so the goddess of grief at the source, and she says burn at the source. Her Chinese element is metal, and her Western element is fire. Her emotions are grief, depression, letting go, and unfeeling. Grief holds us bound in place, a cage whose bars are built with pain and guilt, where we become so immobilized that we forget what free movement felt like, where we forget what it is to have a moment of unbounded joy without the constant filter of loss that has held us in place. Or have you found yourself unmoved and unfeeling in the face of something that should bring you joy? The loss may be a loved one or a relationship that has ended or changed. Dear one, this goddess knows that your grief is deep. It is painted gray over your whole canvas and left space for nothing else. And while it is hard to imagine your life without it, your future will be free of this pain. A loss of a loved one marks us in ways we can neither explain nor deny. This loss has already marked you. It has shaken you to your core. It may never be totally without pain, but for you to heal, you must begin to let go of that grief. You are not your loss. It does not define you. Like any deep emotion, it will be layered, and you will find it needs release in layers. This may take years to do, but first we must pour healing on the source so that it begins to open you to breathe without being bound, so that you can live fully once again as you were meant to. And this has an acupoint. You won't be able to see it in the book, it'll be fuzzy, but basically it's on the biceps. And that's lung 3. And I like to give a little description of the benefits of the point as well. So it helps nosebleeds, cough, asthma, depression, and dizziness. and it's called the window of the sky. So when you release this, you rub the tops of your biceps. So actually, I have an interesting, the practice for this one, the meditation, is really pumping love into those source points. These are source points on the arms. And I have an interesting story. When I first started working with the goddesses, it was as a book. And my other kinesiologist friends were muscle testing for their goddess and reading it to people. And this goddess came up for a young girl who said, well, I've never had a loss. I've never lost a grandparent. I've never lost a parent. I haven't even lost a pet. I've never been broken up with. I don't know what this is about. And as she did the practice where you rub the biceps, she burst into floods of tears. Mm-hmm. I find that really interesting. Did that connect for you, Mark?
It actually did. And I'm going to go back and read it and meditate on it and go through the practice as well, because I could think of a couple of things that might be related to. And then part of the way sometimes versus accepting and embracing it, I almost, the lack of a better word, the word that's coming up for me is I disengage from it. And so that way, I know it, I see it, I know it's there. I just don't kind of allow myself to go into feeling it deeper, longer, or painful. It's almost like I intellectualize it versus embrace it internally from a body, emotional perspective, almost using logic to reason my sanity out of it. Truth be told. So that's something I'm going to look into and do that. But it's a beautiful, beautiful card. You can see the artwork here. It's fantastic. All the artwork on these cards are fantastic. And I know, Michael, if you're listening, you want to take an opportunity to maybe pull a card and have a reading as well, see what it says for you with your divine masculine and how we can support the feminine. All right. Are you there, Michael? Oh, maybe not.
I would love to, and I just had to turn on my microphone. I don't have a deck here, and so the numbers are from 1 to
45.
May I choose 14?
14 it is.
I'll find the card so we can put it up.
Ah, the beauty.
I got it here.
The goddess of inner sight. So she says, seeing past the flames, and she's a fire and fire goddess. This goddess is really about finding your passion, your purpose, and your meaning. Here we go. She's fire and fire. Her emotions are self-realization, self-actualization, passion, and interest. What ignites you? What lights you up? What is the thing or things that make your eyes spark? What could you speak about if you had to give a talk right now? How can you bring that excitement into your daily life? You were not meant to drudge through a survival. You are here to spark your spirit into a revival. How can you bring your passion to light? Take a moment to think or list the things that bring you joy and stimulation. How often are you able to indulge that passion? How better could you access that aspect of yourself? Can you use your passion in your job? Can you make more time to immerse yourself in your interest or find a way to weave it into your day, your week? Connecting with like-minded people is one way to fire up your own engines. Learn more, read more, do more. How often do you hear about people who started a side business that they loved that became their livelihood? This may be your path too. The only person who can explore the gift of your potential is you. You are the only you in the universe, and you are here for a reason. Find it.
Well, that's why.
Okay,
that's why I'm here.
Your point is here. It's triple warm of 5. And I'm just going to read the affirmation, which is actually, I think, very apt for you because I think it feels like you're already doing this. I love what I do, and I love who I am. My passion and my purpose are aligned.
Yes, and I'm working on it, especially with the. I love who I am, because specifically in terms of self-love, there's the danger of what we've been told in our society, perhaps the danger of vanity, and the danger of egoism. And so how can you still love yourself without going into that? And to me, that expression of self-love is really the love through the divine, through God, um, through a higher consciousness, and being connected to that, and really feeling and exchanging, and dancing with it, and revolving around it, and listening to it. And I think that's where my self-love actually comes from, because it is my recognition within myself that I'm able to do it. And that is perhaps a gift, if I can say it that way, that I was given. And it's a precious gift. It's so bountiful, and so joyful, and so meaningful, and so varietal, even, if I can say it that way. And it's almost like you were talking about orgasms early on. It's almost like a spiritual orgasm, not a physical orgasm, but a spiritual orgasm. And so that's thank you for sharing that. And I would love to, next time I see Mark, I'm going to borrow his deck and the book, and go through it. And
I will bring it. I've been carrying it everywhere I go for the past couple of weeks. So
awesome.
it's all good. Well,
I
thank you,
love
Michael.
that.
And I also just want to say thank you for, in knowing you, I see your passion, your humbleness in the way that you serve from spirit and from your heart. And I just want to acknowledge that in you, in that sense, where I've never seen that ego side in a vanity way in our relationship. And I'm always grateful for your support and all the shows that we do and the different programs that we work in, and your connection to all people. And I've always witnessed the way you support the divine feminine as I've known you. So just an honor, brother. Thank you
and
so much.
and and I think this is probably the call of our times, is the support of the divine feminine. And I just listened to a podcast, or a part of a podcast, from Rianne Eisler, which I'm going to be interviewing in a few weeks. And she's written the book The Chalice and the Plate, and it is in 1979, and it is about a culture of dominance. And so for thousands of years we've dominated. We've not just dominated women, but we tried to dominate our planet. We tried to dominate other countries, other cultures, everything that we are doing right now, or have been doing, has been built on this culture of dominance. And when we go back into Neolithic times, before the Greek, women were, I'm not saying in charge, but there was the devotion towards the divine feminine or female leadership. And that leadership was not about dominance. That leadership was about kindness and compassion and sharing and caring. And everybody respected that, because it's a much more effective way to hold a society together, by caring and being kind to one another, than by trying to dominate one another. And so I feel that this is really the calling of our times. And I've asked that question a few women in my lifetime, like, how do you want me to show up as a spiritual warrior, if I can say it that way, as a male, and how do you want me to show up? And while I have certain ideas as to what I can do, I would like to hear it from women. And maybe it's not even, maybe women can't even answer that question, because it's for the divine masculine to answer that question, because we know what we have to do in order to fulfill that piece and bring those two pieces together, because we know ourselves and we know our capacity and we know our spirit and we know our karmic history and our dharma, and so maybe it isn't even for women to answer that question. But I think what it starts with is respect and listening and deep listening. And so I'm deeply honored to be part of this podcast, and for your work and for the work that you've brought forward. And I would like to dive deeper into it and learn more about it. And we're all answering the call of our times. And what I'm truly, truly grateful for is the people that are actually doing it, rather than talking about it. And we can now actually do it. And so I commemorate you for actually picking up the pencil and doing the drawings and writing the book and putting it out there and getting onto a podcast and getting it out there into the world. This is what is needed right now. Action is needed.
Well, so thank you for Michael. Michael, that's a great close, and we've got about 2 minutes left or so. But thank you. You really mirrored my words in many ways, and to the ends, Bronwyn, I thank you for being here. And maybe you can just give a big shout out and let people know how they can learn more about you, where they can find you, and your message for the world as we move forward.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, so I'm on Instagram. I'm not very good at social media. I'm new to social media, so forgive me. I'm trying to map my journey towards becoming more spiritual, opening my third eye, daily practices that I've been doing now for about 2.5 years. And I am able to now be clairaudient and clairvoyant. Not always at whim, but I get messages now. And so my Instagram, I'm on Facebook as Bronwyn E. Millar. I think Bronwyn E. Millar author maybe. And I have a website, but you can buy my cards on Amazon, Simon & Schuster, Barnes & Noble, all the major sites have them. My publishing company is Bear & Company, Inner Traditions. They're amazing, the best esoteric publishers, in my opinion, in the world. And my message is that it's really time to authentically speak and rise up and be yourself. It's time for us to take back the system from the people that have run it for too long. It really is. It's our time to rise, and we're doing it beautifully, and it's happening organically. It's not going to be a fight, as Buckminster Fuller says. Don't fight the system. Build better systems alongside, and people will join you. And we're doing that. We're connecting across the world in the most beautifully organic ways, and it's so exciting. I've had such synchronicities, and people who I've absolutely adored in podcasts that I've written to, that I've now had conversations with, and have reached out, these incredible sort of tendrils of love and connection across the world. So thank you, everybody, for listening to this strange witch from South Africa.
I love it. Well, Bronwyn, I want to thank you for being here. And the links are down below or to the right. If you're watching us live on social media or after the fact, there are links right there. You can also visit us at consciouslivingradio.org. Will be a page up. You can get more information and you can take a deeper dive. If you're listening on the radio and you want to see more, go check us out on our social media platforms, as well as, some of this stuff was visual as we showed cards. So it's all there. But I again want to thank my partner in production, Michael Kraus, for always his great support and great work on the back end and joining us from time to time. Thank you, Bronwyn, for coming in from Johannesburg, South Africa, at a late hour on your time, where it's middle of the afternoon for us here in Vancouver. And I want to thank everyone for listening. You can, again, catch us on consciouslivingradio.org. and every week, 6 p.m. on Wednesdays in Vancouver, 100.5 FM, CFRO Co-op Radio. Again, my name is Marc Caron, and until next time, take care of each other. Bye for now.